Jesus Christ is the Jewish Messiah. He came to his own people, the Jews. And those that accepted him, he gave power to become sons of God. Did that mean that they were not Jewish anymore? No. They were the real Jews, you see. Because many of the Jews didn't like being Jews. They wanted to be like the nations around them. But God wanted a chosen people for himself. And he chose Abraham to be his friend. And then Isaac and Jacob had 12 sons who became 12 tribes of Israel. Sadly, most of these people did not like being Jewish. They did not want to be God's people. They wanted to be like everyone else, you see. They felt different. They didn't want to be different. They rebelled against the idea of being God's people. They didn't want to be God's people. So they learned the habits of the nations around them. They started worshiping different gods because they thought they were really missing out on something. They wanted so much to be like the other nations, and they couldn't. They felt strapped in by God. Oh, we have to be God's people, And they did everything in their power to not be God's people. So the Jews that accepted Jesus Christ, they were the real Jews. You see, they are the ones with the heart of God. The Bible was written for God's people. Those that live by the Spirit. And there are many Jews, The Gentiles, you see, were grafted in to the tree of Israel, the Jewish tree. In fact, there's 10 tribes that have been lost. They lost their identity. But they're also Israelites, you see. But when Jesus Christ came, anyway, what was left of the Jews, or what the Jews that immigrated to Israel from Babylon and from Assyria, it was mostly from the tribe of Judah from Babylon, and then there was the tribe of Benjamin that was included in Judah, and they had the Levites. That's where the people would name Cohen, which means priest. But there was many Jews that were scattered everywhere, And the 10 tribes, they call it the lost 10 tribes, because most of them just lost their identity completely. They never really had any faithful kings in Israel. They're all into calf worship, and Baal worship. And when the kingdom was split from Rehoboam and Jeroboam, they had that big split. And the Israelites never really regained their worship of the true God, the one who causes to become the eternal one, the everlasting God. And that's why they were destroyed by the Assyrians before Judah was destroyed by the Babylonians. But see, that the Jewish people are still God's people, because the Jewish people have the heart of God, which is not violence. See, the nations, Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, they were great military powers. Judah was never a great military power. They were farmers, artisans. They were different from everybody. peaceful people. God wanted them to learn peace and love. They weren't about war. They weren't a warlike people. See, so the true Jewish people are God's people. It wasn't that the Gentiles became God's people, and it isn't that the people that call themselves Christians today are God's people, because most of them don't have the Spirit of God. And without the Spirit of God, you're not His people. That's why they obey rules of men, commandments of men. They dress in uniforms. The Jewish people were always free. They weren't under the commandments of men. You must dress like this. You must wear this tie, or this uniform. That wasn't part of Judaism. When they fought wars, it was because God was teaching them to hate what is evil. He wanted to instill that in them. To destroy these pagan nations, that was God's judgment on the pagan nations. And He used His people because He wanted to hate them to hate bad just like He hates bad. It's nothing to do with being warlike. When Jesus Christ came, He even exemplified it more by saying, love your enemies. Pray for them. John the Baptist told the Roman soldiers, they asked him, what must we do? He says, do violence unto no man. In Acts, the necessary things for the Gentiles, one of them was to abstain from blood. Take a look at that word blood and see how it's used in the Scriptures. It's often used speaking about bloodshed. God's not repeating Himself. When He says abstain from things strangled, that's talking about eating meat with blood in it. But when He says abstain from blood, He's talking about bloodshed. Don't you think that's important? Don't you think that should be mentioned? Yeah, it was one of the necessary things. See, but a lot of people just don't understand the Scriptures. See, the pagans who became Christians, they all like to shave their heads, cut their hair real short and shave their face. That's not a Christian tradition. That's a pagan tradition that the pagans who sort of become Christian, under the name of Christian, adopted. Oh, how about Paul? Doesn't he say that it's a shame for a man to have long hair? No, that's not in the Bible. The word long and the word hair just is not in there. The word is talking about like hair extensions and things like that women wear to adorn their face. It's not talking about long hair and long beards. John the Baptist was a Nazarite. That meant he never had a razor pass over his head. I don't care what these Christians tell you and these pictures they make. And Jesus with short hair and a little short beard. Those are pagan ideas. That's not Jewish Christian ideas. And when I say Jewish Christian, it's because the Jews, the true Christians, are Jews. I'm a Jew. I have no place in this world. Just like God's nation of Israel did not fit in with the world at all. They were strange. They were different. I have no place in this world. There are a few Jews that have no place in this world. But they walk by the Spirit. Now Paul explains the two covenants and how how that pertains to the son of the bondwoman, Ishmael, and the son of the free woman, son of Sarah. who was Isaac. In Isaac shall thy seed be called. And it speaks about that as a division, the dividing of the Jews from the spiritual ones who were really lovers of God, and those that despised the covenant of God, who wanted to be like the world. That's why the division occurred. And what did Paul say? Those of the flesh started persecuting those of the promise. The promised seed was through Isaac. Ishmael was the son of a Hagar, concubine, the Egyptian. She was not a covenant woman. And what did God do? He says, cast out the bondwoman and her child. For what will be called thy seed will be through Isaac. See, so it is today. Those who have rejected God's covenant, wanted to be like the world, they are not Jews. They are worldly people. They've rejected God. They've rejected His covenant. And God rejects them. And they persecute the Jews that walk according to the Spirit of God. See, the true Jews are no part of this world, and we're free. You know? That's why people say, oh, he's crazy or he's an eccentric. Yeah, because we're free. We live by the Spirit of God. We're not tied down to all your rules and regulations. We can't be a part of that. Our hearts cannot submit to that. We're free people. People in churches, I talked about Jehovah's Witnesses. You cannot tell people to become Christian. You cannot compel them to be Christian. You cannot force them. You cannot trick them into it. You cannot convince them to become Christian. And because you tell them to wear certain clothes and use a certain words or certain lingo and make this is not good, you shouldn't celebrate this, you shouldn't say God bless you, that's what the church is. All these little rules they make has nothing to do with being Christian. Because it has nothing to do with the Spirit of God. It's outward display, the same thing like the law covenant that made no one perfect. You can't make up rules for people that are not in the Holy Bible. This regimentation is of pagandom, is of the Egyptian army, is of the Babylonian army. Subjection, subjection, subjection. Do this, do that. That's all about rules of man. Men make. And these wicked Jews that wanted to turn back to Egypt and worship the gods of Egypt and have even done that today and promote that because they hate the God of the Holy Bible, Jehovah, Yahweh. They persecute the seed of God's woman. Now I got another strike on YouTube, and I'm making this while I'm in that strike period 1 week. That's a little slap on. It doesn't mean nothing to me, and yet I know the Bible says that power was given unto them for 42 months, and they will oppress God's people, overcome the saints. Power was given unto them to overcome the saints. That means they pin them down and they have power over them for 42 months. Don't give them the power now. The time's coming when they will pin you down temporarily. But you don't give that power. You don't say, yeah, I submit, I throw in the towel. You don't throw in the towel. And you be wise as a serpent. That's why I have to end this video right now because my 15 minutes is up.